Okay, we're going to work on this snow field here in the foreground. Notice there is a tree line here. It's a much bigger tree line. It's going to be darker and richer. But we have two other issues we have to deal with. One is this road that's spinning back there. How do we get that in there so we see it since it's covered in snow? And then what do we do about the barn here? And we have another horizon line here. There are a variety of ways you can handle the barn. You can, if you're really careful, I can paint around using my flat brush. And if I carefully trim out the barn and I watch how I lay in my pigment, I won't get any of the paint on the barn. But you also know from seeing me do this up here, it's not a perfect way of doing it. So I'd rather mask it out more completely, and I can do this several ways. I'm going to take some tape, and if I put that tape up like so, I want to see where this tape is crossing at what point. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line, kind of rough in where this barn area is, and I'm going to cut this piece of tape there, and that will give me a nice clean edge to work with. So I'll get a pair of scissors here, and I'm going to need a pencil or a pen, and we're going to see if we can't make this work for us today. All right, I need it right there, and it's coming down. So I'm going to cut my tape. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm not going to worry about. I'll get to the silo in a minute. Coming over here, and I can see that edge is right there, and about right there. Take my scissors and cut that. All right, now let's see what we have. So I'm going to lay this down like this, and it looks like, if I get this just right, it's covering what I want it to cover. Yeah, now don't worry about down here. At least I have my roof line protected, and then I can do the same thing for the silo. Now, let's lay this tape like so. My pencil. Looks like it's rounded. I know I'm guessing a little bit here, but it's all right. I'm going to be pretty close. Okay. Now I'm just letting you see what I'm doing here. And the reason I'm trying to cover this a little bit better is that I want to lay in some really dark pigment where that tree line is, and I'm trying to protect as best I can the white area of the barn. Now, I'll round that a little bit differently on that edge. And that's close enough. I may clean that edge up when I'm ready to work on the barn silo itself. I have a way I can do that by lifting out. You already know that. But I'm trying to protect that edge there. Now, we can go in and we can put this water line in here. Don't worry about the tree line. We'll paint that after the fact. We're going to put the shading on this snow right here that we want, and over here on this edge right here going up. And then after we do that, I'm going to show you how to put in that road, and then we'll finally get to the tree line where the barn is itself. All right, so I'm going to take our flat white brush, dip it in our water. Whoops, obviously I didn't have a clean brush there, did I? That's all right, I can take that out. It's wet, and we're going to be putting a blue in there anyway, but right now I want this to be as clean as I can get it. There we go. And I just got to be careful. Now I can paint over that tape. That's not a problem. But when I come down here to this horizon line, I got to be careful. And now remember, this paper is really and then I'm going to trim out the road. I do not want any water on the road, okay? Because I want to try to keep that white. We're going to bring blue up to it. but I want to keep that white. Let's see what we can do here. All right, this is just water. And I'm coming up here to the road, but I'm not getting the road. I might actually end up outlining the road with even some dry paint or dry paper and paint. Now, this is blue only, and I want to make sure my blue is a clean blue, so my brush has to be nice and clean. Dip it into the blue only area. Now, I'm adding a lot of water to this. I don't want to have it to be a real dark color. And let's see if I can't. Yes, that's right. See, I'm doing this. And notice this time I'm coming up past the tree line. All right, and coming up past the tree line. And as is always the case, I have to be careful to make sure this is wet. If it's not, I'll get a hard line, and I don't want a hard line. But what I am trying to do is create a nice soft feathered edge to this snow as it falls into this valley. All right, and I'm going to come over the tree area, and don't worry about that. I'm got to watch that line right there. But you'll notice as long as the paper is wet, that is just sort of wicking up into that wet area, but no hard lines, and that's what I'm after. Then on this road, I want the road to stay white, but I want to round this a little bit, okay? So it's as if the hill is dipping down in the valley, and it's coming to the road, but the road is flat and it's reflecting more light, so I'm letting that show up. Now, one of the things I did, I made my pencil line darker in the beginning because I wanted you to be able to see the pencil lines, and so normally that I would have just about erased that out. We'll see. I think I've done some of this with watercolor pencil, and if that's the case, I'll be able to lift some of that pencil line out. And while it's still wet, you notice I'm going with some darker pigment right down here against the base of this hill. I want it darkest at the base and then to fade up lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes up into the hillside there, right? Then we can take our flat brush and, you know, we can dry the brush and wick out some of that paint, some of that water. Keep that edge real nice and smooth. Now that's looking really pretty nice, the way that is beginning to flow up. From here it's dark, and then up in here it's lighter. Better put just a little bit more water up here just so that it won't get any hard edges. All right. Now look at that, how that top of the hill glows and then it rolls off into this valley area. That may seem dark to you now because the paint is wet, but once it is dry, it will look much different. Now, here's your choice again. Do you want to do a wet in wet technique on your trees, or do you want to do that hard line edge to a tree using dry paper? I'm going to go ahead and start this as a wet into wet. And I want you to see what I'm doing. I'm getting a little bit of brown. Going to wet and clean my brush. Going to get a little bit of blue. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get some green. I'm trying to get the colors to be a little bit more intense. Now, right along this edge, I need to dry this as best I can. I don't want it to wick down here. Actually, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to dry this and then re-wet this. That way I'm sure I'll have a soft edge. So let's take a minute while I get the hair dryer and dry, and I'll come back in just a second and show you how to finish this. Okay, the paper's good and dry, and I'm going to clean my flat brush, and with just water only, I'm going to outline the edge of the snow there, but go up into it, past wherever I had those drawings for the tree line. I have to go up past those a little bit. This is only water that I'm putting down, and I'm trying to be careful to preserve that edge of the snow. I'm then going up past wherever I was marking the area for the tree line. And while that paper is wet, we're going to use the wet into wet technique that I've been showing you. And I push down on this tape to try to get it as tight as I can. Now I'm kind of blotting this, but I want that. Look at that, how that water just kind of wicks up into the paper. But if I'm very careful, I'll keep that snow line intact. It begins to create some of the most beautiful tree effects. And I really do like this look. And I'm trying to be real uneven with the where this scrubby tree line is here. And generally what I do is I lay it in first completely, and then I go back and I darken the base. But you see how that water is just, because this wet and wet technique just makes such beautiful soft edges. Now it's starting to get a little hard over here, but let's see if I can get it up over this barn before we lose that water. And I've added some green to my paint, so I'm getting a little bit more green. Now I'm just trying to create that edge there. I have to get a little bit more water and try to get this done before that paper dries, or I'll have to put more water, which is fine. Alright, now we have to go back and mix a little bit more paint. Alright, a little bit more green. Now what I like to do when it's wet like this, and this is going to be maybe a little bit more water than that, I like to touch the bases of the trees with a little bit darker pigment and let it wake up in there, because you know it's just darker under tree, less light can get in there. And so I'm trying to, well, it's still wet. Look at this. The paper's still wet enough that it's doing that, waking up into the color there. And it's just a darker color. It's a richer color. Now it's going to dry lighter than you see because watercolor has a tendency to do that, but it is creating a nice look. Now you see I've got this green, sort of blue-green. I can go back in while it's still wet and add a little brown, create a little texture if I want. But I'm using a wet into wet technique here to try to make that look like a really nice. Let's see, it's still wet up here. This is great, so I can take advantage of that. Now I'm going to add a little bit more brown while it's still there. And I'm going to even come in here with a little brown and let that kind of flow around. You know, I'm just touching it. I want a little bit more of this because I want that silo to really show and stand out here in a minute. Again, it looks a little darker now. It's going to dry lighter. If you start seeing the paper dry, wet your brush and just use your water. Now I've gotten a nice edge to that. Now it's a little dry over here, so what I'm doing, I'm adding some water and going to push that paint up into there. Let it wick in there. Now that hard line that you see there, I'm going to take that out by cleaning my brush, drying it off, and then let the brush begin to soak up that extra water. And if I do it carefully, I can create that soft edge again. And finally, I may need to take a Q-tip if I don't like that and just really soften it up. This is a dry Q-tip. Okay. I'll get a little bit darker color right in here. I need a little bit more blue. All right. Now what I will tend to do here is that I'll let this dry. I want to see how dark it's going to be. I can tell you that when we hit this with a hairdryer and after it's dry, this is going to be lighter than it looks. I'm also cleaning up my snow line, and we're going to let that dry out and let's see what happens. So we'll be back in a minute to take a look at the final little area.